In lesson 4, we are going to look at analyzing graphs of polynomial functions. And there's two parts that we're going to deal with when we analyze graphs. The first part that we're going to look at is locating zeros of a polynomial. We'll talk about that in terms of the picture of a graph along with the table of values. And then we're going to look at understanding relative min, relative max, and I'm even going to throw in what is an absolute min and an absolute max at the same time in the second half of this lesson. So the first thing we're going to look at is analyzing zeros and where they're located. So I'm going to show you, I have a table here, but I'm also going to show you in terms of a generic graph. And I'm going to start with a generic graph. So here's a coordinate plane. Here could be the graph of any polynomial. And in fact, the one that I just drew out is a degree 3. I'll explain how did I come up with that in a little bit. So if I look at this, the zeros, the roots, the solutions, remember all of those mean the same thing. The roots, the zeros, I'll say zeros, are all going to be where it crosses the x-axis. So in this case, it crosses the x-axis there, there, and there. So we would say in this case, there are 3 technically real zeros, but there are 3 zeros. So whatever the degree of the polynomial is, in this case, the function that I drew out was a degree 3 polynomial, the number of zeros is going to be exactly the same. So if I do a degree 4, the zeros, there would be 4 of them, whether they're real or imaginary. Remember, real are the ones that you can see. Imaginary would be the ones that you can't see, but they're still there technically. We'll talk more about the difference between real and imaginary in later lessons. But for now, just understand that if I have a 5th degree polynomial, I would have 5 zeros. Now we're going to try and figure it out in terms of a table of values. So I'm going to go back to this picture here. And we're going to try and determine where the zeros are located on a table of values. So let's just focus our attention on this very far left 0 over here. I'm actually going to look at the y values. Below the x-axis, these are all negative y values. And once I'm above the x-axis, these are all positive y values. So really the 0 is located wherever the y's change from negative to positive, or in this case over here, when it changes from a positive to a negative. So let's do that for our table of values in this case. So I'm really going to look at my y values. Y values are the same thing as f of x. I'm looking for when it changes sign. So from a negative to a positive. So I'm going from a negative 29 to a negative 7, no change. Now I'm going from a negative 7 to a positive 1. Right there was a change in sign. So we would say that there is a 0 between the x values of negative 1 and 0. Let's see if we can find another one. 1 to 1, that's positive. 1 to negative 1, there's a negative, or sign change between a positive to a negative. So we would say between now 1 and 2. There's one more. It's actually right here as well. It's between 2 and 3 in terms of your x values.